At 6:42 on the morning of March 17, 1944, Sergeant William Matthews crouched behind a shattered concrete wall near Ngulu Island, watching a palm grove 280 yards away through a scope his commanding officer had laughed at for 8 weeks. 29 years old, Yorkshire County shooting champion, 0 confirmed kills. The Japanese had 11 snipers operating in the coastal mangroves, and in the past 96 hours, they had killed 19 men from the 2nd Battalion Royal Marines. Matthews's platoon commander had called his rifle absurd. The other sergeants called it his Birmingham special. When he had unpacked the Lee-Enfield No. 4 with its Aldis telescopic sight and custom Holland mount at Portsmouth in England, the armourer wanted to know if this was meant for deer or krauts. Matthews explained it was for the Japanese. They shipped out before the rifle arrived. Matthews spent the voyage to the Pacific watching other men clean their standard Lee-Enfields while his own weapon sat in a warehouse in Birmingham. He requested it be forwarded through military post. 8 weeks later, in early February of 1944, a supply corporal handed him a wooden crate marked fragile. Inside was the rifle he had saved 3 years of factory wages to buy. The rifle weighed 9.2 Oz. The scope added another 14 Oz. The standard Lee-Enfield issued to every other man in his battalion weighed 9.2 Oz with no magnification. Matthews' rifle was bolt action, 10 rounds. The standard Lee-Enfield was also bolt action, 10 rounds. Captain Henderson ordered him to leave the sporting rifle in his tent and carry a proper military weapon. Matthews carried it anyway. The 2nd Battalion Royal Marines had relieved Australian forces on Ngulu Island in late February of 1944. The Australians had been fighting since November. They had taken the eastern beaches. They had held them, but they had not taken Hill 394, and they had not cleared the Japanese from the mangrove swamps west of the beachhead. Hill 394 stood 1,287 foot tall. The Japanese called it the fortress. 400 men, 52 bunkers. Matthews's battalion attacked on February 24th. They fought for 19 days. They lost 41 men killed and 318 wounded before they finally took the southern slope on March 14th. By then, Matthews had fired his Lee-Enfield exactly 0 times in combat. The mangrove swamps west of the beachhead were different. No bunkers, no fixed positions, just Japanese soldiers who had retreated from the beaches and dug into the dense vegetation. Some of those soldiers were snipers. They had scoped Arisaka Type 97s. They knew the terrain. They knew how to wait. On March 14th, a sniper killed Private Coleman while he was checking ammunition boxes near a supply dump. On March 15th, another sniper killed 3 men from K Company during a patrol. On March 16th, 4 more men died. One of them was shot through the chest from a position the patrol had passed twice. The battalion commander summoned Matthews that night. The Japanese snipers were killing his men faster than dysentery. He needed someone who could shoot. He wanted to know if that Birmingham rifle could actually hit anything. Matthews explained his credentials. Yorkshire County Championship at 800 yards in 1938. 26 years old at the time, youngest winner in the county's history. 4-inch groups at 500 yards with iron sights with the Aldis scope, 8 rounds inside 3 inches at 200 yards. The commander gave him until morning to prove it. If you want to see how Matthews' civilian rifle performed against Japanese snipers trained for jungle warfare, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Matthews. Matthews spent the night checking his rifle. The Lee-Enfield had been packed in grease for the ocean voyage. He cleaned it again. He checked the scope mounts. He loaded 10 rounds of 303 British ammunition he had packed in England. Military ball ammo, the same cartridge the standard Lee-Enfield fired. At dawn on March 17th, Matthews moved into position behind the concrete wall his battalion had captured 4 days earlier. The wall overlooked the mangrove swamps west of the beachhead. Intelligence said the Japanese snipers operated from the palm trees in that area. Some of them reached 70 feet tall with trunks 6 feet thick. A sniper could climb one of those trees before dawn and sit there all day without being seen. Matthews had brought no spotter, no radio man, just his rifle and a canteen and 80 rounds of ammunition in stripper clips. He settled behind the wall and began to watch the trees through his scope. The Aldis sight had 3 power magnification. Not much, but enough to see movement in the branches that the naked eye would miss. The jungle was never silent. Birds, insects, the distant sound of mortars. Matthews had learned to filter out the noise and focus on movement. He glassed the trees slowly, left to right, top to bottom. At 6:42, he saw it. A branch moved. No wind, just a small shift. 68 feet up in a palm tree, 280 yards away. Matthews watched. The branch moved again. Then he saw the shape. A man, dark clothing, positioned in a fork where 2 fronds met. The Japanese sniper was facing east, watching the trail where Matthews' battalion had been moving supplies. Matthews adjusted his scope. 1 click left for wind. He controlled his breathing. The Lee-Enfield's trigger was smooth, 4 pus. He had spent hours adjusting it at Bisley before the war. Now he would find out if a civilian target rifle could kill a man trained to kill him first. Matthews squeezed the trigger. The Lee-Enfield kicked into his shoulder. The sound cracked through the jungle. 280 yards away. The Japanese sniper jerked and fell. He dropped through the fronds. His body tumbled 68 feet and hit the ground near the base of the palm tree. Matthews worked the bolt. The empty cartridge ejected. He chambered another round. He kept his scope on the tree, waited for movement. Nothing. The sniper's partner would be close. Japanese snipers worked in pairs. 1 shooter, 1 spotter. If Matthews had just killed the shooter, the spotter was somewhere in that tree or in the trees nearby. Matthews scanned the surrounding palms. The scope's 3 power magnification forced him to search slowly. Each tree could hide multiple men. The jungle canopy created shadows that made shapes impossible to distinguish without careful observation. At 7:14, he found the second sniper. Different tree, 50 yards north of the first. This one was lower, maybe 40 feet up. The Japanese soldier was moving down the trunk, retreating. He had heard the shot and knew his position was compromised. Matthews aimed, led the movement, fired. The second sniper fell backwards off the tree. His rifle clattered through the branches ahead of him. Both hit the jungle floor within seconds of each other. 2 shots, 2 kills. Matthews reloaded his Lee-Enfield from a stripper clip. His hands were steady. His breathing was controlled. This was no different than shooting at Bisley, except the targets shot back. At 8:47, a Japanese bullet struck the concrete wall 4 inches from Matthews's head. The impact sprayed dust into his face. He rolled left and pressed himself against the ground. The shot had come from the southwest, different direction than the first 2 snipers. Matthews waited 4 minutes before moving. He inched back to his firing position and glassed the trees to the southwest. The shooter would have moved after taking the shot. That was basic sniper doctrine: shoot and relocate. But in a jungle this dense, relocation options were limited. Matthews found him at 9:03, 4th tree from the right, in a cluster of 6 palms, 59 feet up. The Japanese sniper had repositioned to a different branch, but remained in the same tree. A mistake. Matthews put the crosshairs on the dark shape and fired. The third sniper fell without making a sound. By midday, Matthews had killed 6 Japanese snipers. Word spread through the battalion. Men who had mocked his Birmingham rifle now asked if they could watch him work. Matthews refused. Spectators drew attention. Attention drew fire. The Japanese snipers adapted after the 6th kill. They stopped moving during daylight. Matthews spent the afternoon glassing trees and seeing nothing. At 15:30 hours, he returned to battalion headquarters. Captain Henderson was waiting. The mockery was gone from his voice. He wanted Matthews back in position at dawn. March 18th began with rain. Heavy tropical rain that turned the jungle floor into mud and made the trees invisible beyond 80 yards. Matthews sat behind the concrete wall and waited for the weather to clear. The rain stopped at 07:28. By 08:12, enough visibility had returned for work. Matthews spotted the first sniper of the day at 09:31. The Japanese soldier had climbed into position during the rain. Smart. The sound of rain masked movement. This sniper had chosen a tree 315 yards out, longer range than yesterday. Also smart. They were learning his capabilities. Matthews compensated for distance and fired. The sniper fell. The seventh kill brought a response Matthews had not anticipated. At 10:14, Japanese mortars began hitting the area around his position. They had triangulated his location based on muzzle flash or sound. The first rounds landed 35 yards short. The second salvo landed 18 yards short. The third salvo would hit the wall. Matthews grabbed his rifle and ran. He sprinted east along the tree line and dove into a bomb crater. As the third salvo hit, the wall he had occupied moments before disappeared in explosions and flying debris. He relocated to a different position. A destroyed vehicle 140 yards east of the wall. The vehicle provided cover and a clear view of the swamps. Matthews settled in and resumed his watch. The Japanese sent more snipers that afternoon. They knew Matthews was hunting them. They were now hunting him back. The dynamic had changed. This was no longer target shooting. This was a duel. At 15:12, Matthews killed his 8th sniper. At 16:27, he killed his 9th. This one had climbed high, 82 feet up a palm tree. Good concealment, but the height created a silhouette against the sky when the sun angle changed. At 16:45 hours, Captain Henderson sent a runner to bring Matthews back. Matthews had been in position for 10 hours. Henderson wanted numbers. Matthews reported 9 confirmed kills over 2 days. 14 rounds fired, 9 kills, 5 misses. Henderson assigned Matthews to continue sniper operations starting at dawn on March 19th. That night, Matthews cleaned his Lee-Enfield and considered the mathematics. 11 Japanese snipers operating in the mangrove swamps. 9 now dead. 2 remaining. Those 2 would be the best, the ones who had survived the longest. And now they knew exactly what Matthews looked like and exactly what rifle he carried. Matthews loaded his Lee-Enfield with 10 fresh rounds and tried to sleep. At 02:45, he gave up and sat in his tent with the rifle across his lap. The rain started again at 04:37. By 06:15, it was heavy enough that dawn operations would be delayed. Matthews used the time to move to a new position. Not the wall, not the destroyed vehicle. Somewhere the Japanese would not expect. He chose a spot 90 yards south of his previous position, a cluster of large boulders the Australians had used as a machine gun nest back in November. The position offered good cover and overlapping fields of fire into the swamps. He settled in and waited for the rain to stop. At 08:06, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Visibility improved. Matthews began glassing trees. At 08:29 on March 19th, he found sniper number 10. The Japanese soldier was positioned in a coconut palm 210 yards out, low, only 35 feet up. Unusual. Most snipers climbed high for better sight lines. This one had chosen concealment over elevation. The palm fronds created a natural hide that would be invisible from ground level. But Matthews was not at ground level. He was elevated on the boulders. The angle gave him a view down into the fronds. He could see the dark shape of the sniper's shoulders and head. Matthews aimed, controlled his breathing, began to squeeze the trigger. Then he stopped. Something was wrong. The position was too obvious, too easy. Matthews had been hunting snipers for 3 days. He had killed 9 men. The remaining 2 would not make elementary mistakes. They would not position themselves where an elevated shooter could spot them unless it was bait. Matthews lowered his rifle and scanned the surrounding trees. If the sniper in the coconut palm was bait, the real shooter would be positioned to cover him, watching for anyone who took the shot, waiting for muzzle flash, ready to return fire. Matthews glassed the trees methodically, left to right, top to bottom. He checked every tree within 250 yards of the coconut palm. It took 13 minutes. At 08:42, he found the real threat. A palm tree 95 yards northwest of the coconut palm, 76 feet up. The Japanese sniper was positioned in a perfect hide. Branches and fronds concealed him from three sides. He had a clear line of sight to Matthews's previous position at the destroyed vehicle. He was waiting for Matthews to appear there or to take a shot at the bait in the coconut palm. Matthews had two problems. First, the real sniper was watching the wrong location. If Matthews fired at him, the sound would reveal Matthews's actual position. The sniper would relocate before Matthews could work the bolt and chamber another round. Second, if Matthews did nothing, the sniper would eventually realize Matthews was not at the destroyed vehicle and begin searching for him. Matthews decided to use the bait against them. He aimed at the decoy sniper in the coconut palm, adjusted for wind, fired. The decoy sniper jerked and fell from the palm. Matthews immediately swung his rifle toward the palm tree 76 feet up. The real sniper would react to the shot. He would turn toward the sound. That turn would create movement. Matthews saw it. A slight shift. The sniper was repositioning to face Matthews's location. Matthews put the crosshairs on the dark shape and fired before the sniper could fully turn. The real sniper fell. His rifle tumbled after him. 2 shots, 2 kills. But Matthews had revealed his position to anyone else watching. He grabbed his rifle and ammunition and ran. He moved south along the boulder line and dropped into a drainage ditch 55 yards away. He pressed himself into the mud and waited. At 08:49, Japanese machine gun fire raked the boulders where he had been positioned 7 seconds earlier. The bullets kicked up dust and rock fragments. The fire lasted 21 seconds. When it stopped, Matthews counted to 90 before moving. He relocated again, this time to a position 130 yards west, a shell crater partially filled with rainwater. Matthews settled into the crater with water up to his chest. He rested the Lee-Enfield on the crater rim and resumed glassing trees. 11 confirmed kills, 0 remaining. The 11th sniper would be the best, the smartest, the most experienced. He had watched 10 of his comrades die over 3 days. He knew Matthews's tactics. He knew Matthews's rifle. He knew Matthews's approximate location. And somewhere in those trees, he was watching, waiting, planning. Matthews scanned the jungle through his scope. The Aldis magnification made distant shapes visible, but not identifiable. Every dark spot could be a branch or a man. Matthews had to study each one carefully. At 1002, he realized his mistake. The 11th sniper was not in the trees. He was on the ground, and he was moving toward Matthews's position. Matthews saw the movement at the edge of his peripheral vision, 75 yards south, low to the ground, a shape moving through the undergrowth parallel to the tree line. The Japanese sniper was using the jungle floor vegetation for cover, ferns, vines, fallen branches. He was crawling toward Matthews's last known position at the boulders. Matthews remained motionless in the water-filled crater. The Lee-Enfield was already shouldered. His breathing was controlled, but the angle was wrong. The crater rim blocked his view of the approaching sniper. Matthews would have to rise up to get a clear shot. Rising up would expose him. The Japanese sniper stopped moving at 1007. He had reached a position 52 yards from the boulders. Matthews watched through his scope. The sniper was studying the boulders, searching for movement for any sign of his target. Matthews waited. Patience was the primary skill of sniper work. The ability to remain still, to let time pass, to wait for the right moment rather than force a bad shot. At 10:13, the Japanese sniper began moving again. He crawled forward 47 yards from the boulders, 42 yards, 37 yards. He was approaching from the south side, the side Matthews had used when he evacuated under machine gun fire. Matthews understood the tactic. The Japanese sniper had watched the machine gun attack. He knew Matthews had moved west from the boulders. He was now working his way along the most likely escape route, hunting Matthews the way Matthews had been hunting him. At 10:18, the Japanese sniper reached the boulders. He moved into the machine gun nest and took up a position facing west toward the drainage ditch, toward the area where Matthews should have relocated. The sniper was now 51 yards from Matthews's actual position in the water-filled crater, but he was facing the wrong direction. His back was exposed. Matthews had a clear shot. Center mass 51 yards, an easy shot even without a scope. But Matthews hesitated. This sniper had survived 11 days of British operations in the mangrove swamps. He had outlived 10 other snipers, men who had been killed because they made mistakes. This man would not make mistakes. The position in the boulders was too exposed, too vulnerable. No experienced sniper would remain there for more than a few seconds. This had to be another decoy, another bait position. Matthews kept his scope on the sniper in the boulders, but expanded his awareness to the surrounding area. If this was bait, the real threat would be positioned to cover it somewhere with line of sight to anyone who took the shot. At 10:21, Matthews found it. A second Japanese soldier, 85 yards northwest of the boulders behind a fallen tree trunk. This soldier was not moving, not repositioning, just watching, waiting. His rifle was aimed toward the drainage ditch where Matthews should have been hiding. 2 men, not 1. The 11th sniper had brought support, or perhaps these were the final 2 snipers, numbers 10 and 11, working together. Matthews made his decision. He could not shoot both men before they reacted. The bolt-action Lee-Enfield required him to work the action between shots. That gave them time to locate him and return fire. He needed a different approach. Matthews slowly lowered himself deeper into the water. He submerged until only his eyes and the top of his head remained above the surface. He kept the Lee-Enfield pointed skyward to keep water out of the barrel. Then he waited. At 10:28, the Japanese soldier in the boulders stood up. He had spent 10 minutes watching the drainage ditch and seen nothing. He believed Matthews had moved farther west. He turned and signaled to his partner behind the fallen tree. Both men began moving west, parallel to each other, 85 yards apart. They were executing a sweep, planning to flush Matthews out or find his position. Matthews remained in the water, motionless. The 2 Japanese soldiers moved past his crater. They were now between Matthews and the tree line. Their backs were exposed. Matthews rose from the water. Slowly, silently, he brought the Lee-Enfield to his shoulder. Water dripped from the barrel, from his uniform, from his face. He aimed at the closer soldier, the one who had been in the boulders, now 56 yards away. Matthews fired. The soldier dropped. Matthews worked the bolt, chambered another round, swung the rifle toward the second soldier behind the fallen tree. The man was turning, raising his rifle. Matthews fired first. The second soldier fell. 11 shots fired over 3 days. 11 Japanese snipers dead. Matthews had cleared the mangrove swamps of the threat that had killed 19 British soldiers in 4 days. But as Matthews climbed out of the crater and retrieved his spent cartridges, he heard a sound that made him freeze. Voices, Japanese voices coming from the tree line, multiple men moving toward the fallen soldiers. Matthews had killed the snipers. But the snipers had not been working alone. Matthews dropped back into the crater. The water was cold, muddy. He submerged until only his eyes remained above the surface. The Lee-Enfield he held vertically to keep the barrel clear. The Japanese voices grew louder. At least 7 men, maybe more. They were moving toward the 2 dead snipers. Close enough that he could hear them clearly, even without understanding the words. Then the voices stopped, at the location of the first body, 56 yards from his crater. Close enough that he could hear equipment rattling. These were not snipers. Infantry. A patrol or recovery team sent to collect the bodies. Matthews counted seconds. The voices moved to the second body. More conversation. Urgent tones. At 10:43, the voices began moving again, not back toward the tree line, toward Matthews's crater. They had found his tracks, boot prints in the mud leading from the boulders to the crater. Matthews had been careful about noise and movement. He had not been careful about tracks. Matthews had 10 rounds in the Lee-Enfield, 7 Japanese soldiers at minimum. Poor odds for a bolt-action rifle. He considered his options. Stay hidden and hope they passed by, or fight. The voices grew closer. 40 yards, 35 yards, 28 yards. At 10:46, a Japanese soldier appeared at the crater rim. He was looking down directly at Matthews. Their eyes met. Matthews fired from the water. The soldier fell backward. Matthews worked the bolt while still submerged, chambered another round, rose up. 3 more soldiers were at the crater rim. Matthews fired, worked the bolt, fired again. Both soldiers dropped. 7 rounds left. Matthews could hear shouting. More soldiers moving toward him. He climbed out of the crater on the north side, away from the approaching voices. He ran 28 yards and dropped behind a fallen tree. Japanese rifle fire cracked through the jungle. Bullets struck the ground around the crater around the fallen tree. The soldiers were firing at movement, at sound, not at confirmed targets. Matthews stayed low. He glassed the area through a scope. Saw movement. 3 soldiers advancing toward the crater. 65 yards out. Matthews aimed at the lead soldier. Fired. The soldier dropped. The second soldier dove for cover. 5 rounds left. Matthews heard more voices behind him. The Japanese were flanking. One group approaching from the south, another from the east. Matthews was about to be surrounded. He made his decision. He could not win a firefight with a bolt-action rifle against multiple soldiers with semi-automatic weapons. He needed to break contact, move back toward British lines. Matthews grabbed his rifle and ran north. He sprinted through the jungle undergrowth. Vines caught his boots. Branches whipped his face. Japanese rifle fire followed him. Bullets snapped past, struck trees, kicked up dirt. Matthews ran for 120 seconds before diving into another shell crater. This one was dry. He pressed himself against the crater wall and listened. The Japanese voices were distant now. They had not pursued. They were regrouping around their dead. Matthews checked his rifle. Mud on the stock, water still dripping from the barrel. He had 5 rounds left and no stripper clips. The clips were in his pack. The pack was somewhere near the water-filled crater. At 11:02, Matthews began moving again, not running, walking, staying low, using the terrain for cover. He moved northeast toward the British lines. The jungle was quiet. No voices, no movement, just the sound of his own breathing and the distant rumble of artillery. At 11:29, Matthews reached the British perimeter. A Marine sentry challenged him. Matthews identified himself. The sentry led him through. Matthews walked to battalion headquarters and reported to Captain Henderson. Henderson wanted a full debrief. Matthews provided it. 11. Japanese snipers killed over 4 days. 14 rounds fired against the snipers. 11 hits. Then a firefight with infantry. 4 more kills. 7 total rounds in that engagement. Henderson asked about ammunition status. Matthews was down to 5 rounds. Henderson asked about the rifle. Matthews said it was functional but needed cleaning. Mud in the action, water in the barrel. Henderson told Matthews to clean his rifle and rest. No operations tomorrow. The battalion was moving east. The mangrove swamps were no longer a priority. The Japanese were evacuating Ngulu Island. Intelligence suggested they would complete the withdrawal within 3 weeks. Matthews returned to his tent. He field-stripped the Lee-Enfield and spent 3 hours cleaning every component, gun oil and patches. Patches run through the barrel until they came out clean. He checked the scope mounts, adjusted the eye relief, loaded 10 fresh rounds. At 15:30 hours, word came down from division headquarters. The battalion commander wanted to see Matthews. Matthews walked to headquarters, wondering if Henderson had filed a negative report. Unauthorized engagement, excessive ammunition expenditure, operating alone without support. Instead, he found Henderson and 3 other officers waiting. One of them was Colonel Bradford, the regimental commander. Bradford had one question. Could Matthews train other men to do what he had done? Matthews said he could try, but it would require time and rifles with optics, and men who could already shoot. Bradford said division had 18 Lee-Enfield rifles with Aldis scopes, sniper rifles left behind by New Zealand forces, and Bradford had 52 men in the regiment who had qualified as expert marksmen before deployment. Bradford wanted Matthews to create a sniper section, train the men, develop tactics, clear any remaining Japanese snipers from British operational areas. Matthews accepted, but he had one condition. He wanted to keep his Lee-Enfield. Bradford approved the request. Matthews kept his Lee-Enfield. The 18 Lee-Enfield rifles with Aldis scopes went to the men Matthews would train. Training began on March 22nd. Matthews had 52 men assembled at a makeshift range 3 miles east of the beachhead. The men were expert marksmen on paper. They had qualified with iron sights at ranges up to 600 yards, but none of them had combat experience as snipers. None of them had killed a man from concealment. Matthews started with the fundamentals: breathing control, trigger squeeze, reading wind. The Lee-Enfield rifles weighed 10 plumb-tons, with the Aldis scopes. Heavier than the standard rifle, heavier than Matthews's custom rifle. The weight made the rifles stable but tiring to hold for extended periods. Matthews taught them to use any available support: rocks, logs, sandbags. The jungle rarely offered perfect shooting positions. Snipers had to adapt to terrain and create stable platforms from whatever materials were available. Range training lasted 4 days. Matthews had the men shoot at stationary targets from 100 to 350 yards, then moving targets, then targets partially concealed by vegetation. By March 26th, 41 of the 52 men could consistently hit man-sized targets at 250 yards under field conditions. Matthews divided them into 22-man teams, shooter and spotter. The spotter carried binoculars and a standard Lee-Enfield. His job was to locate targets and provide security while the shooter engaged. After each kill, the roles could switch. This kept both men proficient and prevented the single point of failure that came from relying on one shooter. On March 28th, Matthews took 6 teams into the field. Their mission was to clear Japanese positions north of the main beachhead. Intelligence indicated small groups of Japanese soldiers were still operating in that area. Not snipers, just infantry, stragglers who had not yet evacuated. The 6 teams moved into position at dawn. Matthews paired with a spotter named Corporal Davies. They set up on high ground overlooking a trail the Japanese had been using for movement. At 07:48, a Japanese soldier appeared on the trail. Davies confirmed the target through binoculars. Matthews fired. The soldier dropped. Matthews worked the bolt and scanned for additional targets. None appeared. Over the next 7 hours, Matthews' team engaged 9 more Japanese soldiers on that trail. 9 shots, 8 kills, 1 miss due to wind. The other 5 teams reported similar results. 31 Japanese soldiers killed that day, 0 British casualties. The sniper section continued operations through early April. By April 12th, the section had killed 96 Japanese soldiers. The number was conservative, only counted confirmed kills where the body could be observed. The Japanese evacuation accelerated during this period. Destroyers arrived at night to pick up troops from the northern coast of Ngulu Island. British forces pushed north to interdict the evacuation, but the Japanese fought effective rearguard actions. Matthews's sniper section was tasked with eliminating Japanese soldiers covering the retreat routes. On April the 9th, Matthews was operating near the coastal road when a Japanese rifleman shot him. The bullet struck Matthews in the left shoulder. The impact spun him around and knocked him down. Davies dragged Matthews to cover and called for a medic. The wound was serious, but not fatal. The bullet had passed through muscle without hitting bone or major blood vessels. Matthews was evacuated to a field hospital near the beachhead. Doctors cleaned the wound and sutured it closed. They told Matthews he would recover but needed rest. No combat operations for at least 4 weeks. Matthews spent 3 weeks at the field hospital. During that time, the Japanese completed their evacuation of Ngulu Island. On April 14th, British forces reached the northern coast and found it empty. The campaign was over. Matthews's sniper section had operated for 18 days. 96 confirmed kills, 0 friendly casualties during sniper operations. The section was officially recognised by division headquarters. Colonel Bradford recommended Matthews for a military medal, but Matthews's war was not finished. While he recovered at the field hospital, orders came down from Pacific Command. The Army needed experienced combat instructors for a new mission, something in Malaya, something classified. Matthews volunteered. By May, Matthews was on a transport ship heading west across the Pacific. His Lee-Enfield was packed in a waterproof case in the cargo hold. The Aldis scope was wrapped in oilcloth. Matthews did not know the details of the Malaya mission. He only knew it involved jungle warfare, long-range patrols, operations behind Japanese lines. The kind of mission where a man with a rifle that could hit targets at 500 yards might prove useful. The transport reached India on May 18th. Matthews and 180 other instructors were briefed on their assignment. They would join a new unit, 2,800 men total. The unit had no official designation yet. The men called themselves something else. They called themselves Wingate's Chindits. The 77th Indian Infantry Brigade was officially designated on June 12, 1944, but the men had been training since May. Long-range penetration tactics, jungle survival, operations without supply lines. The unit was modelled after earlier Chindit operations, small mobile forces that could operate deep behind enemy lines for extended periods. Matthews was assigned to the 3rd Battalion. His role was not officially listed as sniper. The British Army did not have formal sniper positions in its table of organisation. Matthews was designated as a rifle platoon sergeant. But battalion command knew what Matthews could do with a rifle. Training took place in central India. The terrain was different from Ngulu Island, but the principles remained the same. Heat, humidity, dense vegetation, limited visibility. The Malaya jungle would be worse. Steeper terrain, heavier rainfall, and an enemy that knew the ground better than any British force. Matthews modified his equipment for the Malaya mission. The Lee-Enfield had performed well on Ngulu Island, but that had been short-range operations with regular resupply. Malaya would involve patrols lasting weeks, hundreds of miles through jungle. Every ounce of weight mattered. Matthews removed the Aldis scope and replaced it with a lighter Weaver 440. The Weaver had the same 3-power magnification, but weighed 9 Oz less. He also replaced the wooden stock with a lighter synthetic version. The modifications reduced the rifle's weight from 10 plazos 2 Oz to 9 Leibsound 4 Oz. Not much, but over a 3-week patrol carrying 70 platoons of equipment, every ounce mattered. The Chindits entered Malaya in August of 1944. Their mission was to advance through northern Malaya and disrupt Japanese supply routes into Burma. The Japanese controlled the area with approximately 5,000 troops. The Chindits would approach overland through terrain the Japanese considered impassable for large forces. Mountains, rivers, dense jungle, no roads, limited trails. The force would carry all supplies on their backs or with pack mules. No motorized transport, no artillery support, just rifles and mortars, and the ability to move fast through impossible terrain. Matthews' battalion began the march on August the 19th. The first week covered 97 miles through mountainous jungle. Men collapsed from exhaustion. Malaria cases increased daily. The pack mules struggled with the terrain. Several had to be shot when they broke legs on steep descents. By September, the battalion had covered 254 miles. They had engaged Japanese forces 15 times. Small skirmishes, ambushes, quick firefights followed by rapid withdrawal. The Chindits were not meant to hold ground. They were meant to move, to harass, to cut supply lines and create chaos behind Japanese positions. Matthews used his Lee-Enfield 4 times during the march, once at 437 yards against a Japanese officer directing troops at a river crossing, once at 395 yards against a machine gun position, once at 310 yards against a sniper who had pinned down a Chindit patrol. 4 shots, 4 kills. Matthews never fired more than once per engagement. The Lee-Enfield's report was distinctive, different from the standard rifle's sharp crack. 1 shot announced his presence. A 2nd shot would give the Japanese time to locate him. Matthews learned to shoot and move immediately. The march to the target area took 4 months. By late December, the Chindits had covered over 800 miles. They had lost more men to disease than combat, malaria, dysentery, typhus. The unit that entered Malaya with 2,800 men was down to fewer than 1,800 effectives. On December 23rd, the Chindits disrupted a major Japanese supply convoy. The operation was a success, but the cost had been severe. The unit was combat ineffective. Too many casualties, too many sick, too much time in the jungle without rest or proper medical care. Matthews survived the Malaya campaign. His Lee-Enfield survived, but the rifle that had proven so effective on Ngulu Island had been used only 8 times in 4 months of operations. The Chindits rarely engaged in the kind of long-range precision shooting that required a scoped rifle. Most combat was close-range ambushes at 60 yards or less, firefights in dense vegetation where you could barely see 40 feet. Matthews realized something during those 4 months in Malaya. The Lee-Enfield was an excellent rifle, perhaps one of the best bolt-action military rifles ever made. But modern warfare was changing. Semi-automatic rifles like the American Garand were becoming standard. The next war would require different weapons, different tactics. But there would be no next war for Matthews, not immediately. By January of 1945, he was evacuated from Malaya with the rest of the Chindits. The unit was disbanded. Matthews was reassigned to training duties in the United Kingdom. Matthews returned to the United Kingdom in February of 1945. The Army promoted him to warrant officer and assigned him to the Small Arms School at Hythe in Kent. His job was training infantry instructors in marksmanship and small unit tactics. He taught the lessons he had learned on Ngulu Island and in Malaya, how to move through jungle terrain, how to identify and engage targets at distance, how to operate independently without supply lines. He kept his Lee-Enfield. The rifle had travelled from Birmingham to Portsmouth to Ngulu Island, to India, to Malaya, to Kent. It had killed at least 19 enemy soldiers in confirmed engagements, probably more. Matthews had stopped counting after Malaya. The rifle sat in a footlocker in his quarters at Hythe. Matthews rarely looked at it. The war had changed. The Pacific Islands were being retaken one by one. British forces were advancing through Burma and into Malaya. The need for individual marksmen with privately owned rifles was fading. The military was standardizing mass production, interchangeable parts, soldiers with identical equipment and identical training. Matthews understood the necessity. Modern warfare required industrial scale, but something was being lost. The individual skill, the craftsman approach to soldiering, the idea that a man with the right rifle and the right training could change the outcome of a battle. Matthews was discharged from the army in August of 1946. Warrant Officer Class 2, 1 military medal, 1 wound stripe, combat infantry badge. He returned to Yorkshire and enrolled at Durham University on an ex-serviceman's grant. He studied engineering, graduated with honours in 1949. After Durham, Matthews spent 5 years at Imperial College London. then 3 years in British East Africa, studying infrastructure development and colonial administration. He eventually settled in London as a consulting engineer for the Ministry of Public Works. Later, he joined the Commonwealth Development Corporation as a technical advisor on African development projects. Matthews never spoke publicly about Ngulu Island or Malaya during those years. He had colleagues who knew he had served in the Pacific, but they did not know about the mangrove swamps. They did not know about the Japanese snipers. They did not know about the Lee-Enfield that sat in a case in his home. In 1948, Matthews decided to write down what had happened. Not for publication, just for his own record. He wanted to document the weapons and tactics of jungle warfare while the details were still fresh. He wrote for 8 months. The manuscript grew to over 380 pages. A friend at the National Rifle Association read the manuscript and suggested publication. Matthews was reluctant. The book was technical, detailed descriptions of rifles and ammunition and ballistics. Not the kind of content that interested general readers, but the NRA convinced him. The book was published in 1949 under the title Precision in the Pacific. It became a standard reference among firearms enthusiasts and military historians. The book described Matthews' experiences on Ngulu Island and Malaya with clinical precision. No embellishment, no hero worship, just facts and observations about what worked and what did not work in combat. The book is still in print today, still used as a reference by collectors and historians studying World War II small arms. Matthews's descriptions of Japanese weapons remain some of the most detailed contemporary accounts available. Matthews lived to see the United Kingdom fight 3 more wars: Malaya Emergency, Suez Crisis, Falklands War. He watched the evolution of military rifles from the Lee-Enfield to the L1A1 to the L85. He watched sniping become a formal military specialty with dedicated training and equipment. He watched the lessons of World War II being relearned and refined by new generations of soldiers. William Matthews died on February 8, 2007. He was 92 years old. The Lee-Enfield that had killed Japanese snipers on Ngulu Island was donated to the Imperial War Museum in London. It sits in a display case with a placard describing its history. Most visitors walk past without stopping. It looks like any other vintage military rifle, but it is not. It is the rifle that proved a county champion marksman with a mail-order scope could outshoot professionally trained military snipers. The rifle that cleared the mangrove swamps in 4 days when an entire battalion could not do it in 2 weeks. The rifle that changed how the British military thought about individual marksmanship in modern warfare. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favour, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people there. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about riflemen who proved themselves with skill and courage. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure William Matthews doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.